My name is Felicity Baker. I am a journalist on the kind of 1, 6 and 10 o'clock news at the BBC. So a little bit about my job. I am responsible for kind of getting the news on air, I suppose. So I work with correspondents to put the news pieces together that go out on the 6 and the 1 and the 10 o'clock news, find the pictures, help them with scripting. I go into the edit suite sometimes and put the piece together if they're not there, and I also help write the auto cues, write the headlines, cut that. So it's just everything involved with getting the news on air and speaking to the presenters to make sure they're happy before they go and do it live. I've stammered for as long as I can remember. When I was younger, it was much more prevalent, and I found it really hard to say a lot of words, and as a result, kind of growing up, I was very quiet as a child. I didn't really speak out at school. I kept it all very internalized, and I tried to learn ways around it. As I grew older, my speech became more fluent, and as a result of that, I was able to start avoiding words and avoiding situations to the point where I could appear fluent. So it was something I found very difficult to deal with when I was a child, and it's something I found very difficult to deal with kind of growing up as well. And when I got to the age of 11 at school, I was finding it really hard to just kind of, I guess, cope in a way, and with reading out in class, and I wasn't able to avoid to the point where I could be fluent, and I just found school a really horrendous experience. So I went to my parents and I kind of told them the extent of it for the first time, and then I went to see a speech therapist on the NHS for the first time, and that's kind of when I first started to get help for it. So I do find stammering, it's something I found very hard to deal with throughout my life, and it's something I think a lot of people find hard to deal with, I can relate to as well. But as I've grown older, I still use avoidance techniques a lot. Obviously, that's how I kind of appear fluent in my daily life, and it's how I've got through at work. But more recently, I've been more open about it, and now I'm finding it much easier. And I'm really glad that I kind of took that step to just talk about it a bit more often. I wish I'd done it when I was younger, to be honest. So I don't really meet other women who stammer, and I think that's kind of the main difference, I would say, is that I don't really meet. And for a long time, when I did start to get help and I went to kind of groups, it would be mainly men there, and so I always felt a little bit like it was strange just not meeting any other women who stammer. So I think that was the main thing. I think in terms of me personally, it's just I've kind of allowed it. I don't want to say I've allowed it to hold me back, because I haven't in many ways, but I think it's affected my confidence in life kind of generally, whether that's still now speaking out in big events or at meetings. I find that really hard to do, putting myself forward in situations where I'm going to have to speak. Things like this are things that I to this day get really nervous about and don't particularly enjoy doing, because it puts a lot of strain on trying to kind of trying to appear fluent, even though I know I don't need to be, but it's kind of ingrained in me to kind of use those techniques all the time to kind of try and pretend that I'm fluent even though I'm not. A helpful technique for me is to breathe. I know we've all been told this, but actually to kind of stop and just breathe properly when I'm speaking, I do find really helps if I'm kind of in a moment of stammering and I just stop and costal breathing. It does actually really help me. But what I found really helpful is kind of the cognitive behavioural therapy element of the speech therapy I had, just learning to kind of try and look at my stammer slightly differently compared to because I always had quite negative feelings towards it. So actually, knowing that if I do stammer, just kind of knowing that I'll get through it and I will be fine. It will be uncomfortable, but I will be fine. And it's not going to stop me doing anything. I will get the word out eventually. So just kind of changing the way I think about it and making myself slow down and take deep breaths are two of kind of the best techniques that I found that have really helped help my stammer and help me get more control over it. So I actually got on to the BBC via the Extend scheme, which is a scheme for people who are disabled, and I thought maybe I'd try and use my, maybe my stammer could help me out, and so I applied for it. I went for the interview, and honestly, it was the first job interview I'd ever had. So I stammered a lot during it, and I was really embarrassed the whole way through, and I kind of walked out thinking that was, I don't even know why I turned up. So it's for a work experience placement at BBC Breakfast. Anyway, about a week later, I got a call, and they said that I'd got the job, and I was so shocked. So it was 6 months paid work experience at the BBC. I always wanted to work at the BBC, but I didn't know how to get in. So they offered me that, and I went along and I did 6 months, and it was amazing. And then they kind of extended me for a bit, and then I got another job, and it's now been 12 years, and I never left. But one thing I will say is that when I started the BBC, and I said to the man who'd interviewed me, who was my boss at the time, and I said, I don't understand, why did you give me the job? I stammered so much. And he said, I barely even noticed that. I was just trying to listen to what you had to say, and you were nice and you were keen, and I wanted to give you a chance. So I just let that be a lesson, I'm so glad I kind of put myself in that position, and actually I owe my career at the BBC to the fact I have a stammer, because I probably would never have got in without it. So I would say to my younger self that I can do anything I want, and I know that sounds really cliched, but actually it's so true, because if I'd said to my 11-year-old self knew that I worked at the BBC, that I would do, appear on screen and front a half-an-hour documentary on BBC One, I would never ever believe that. Never believe that was possible. To even have a career at the BBC would something I would never have. So it's honestly anything is possible. That's kind of the main thing, and you should never ever let your stammer back. And actually now I am proud of it. I am genuinely proud of it, because the people I've met as a result of it, and knowing that there are so many of us out there kind of experiencing the same thing every day, has been really amazing and really emotional in a really, really good way. So to anyone, to my younger self, to anyone out there, you just don't let it hold you back, and be open about it. It's the kind of the advice I can give you as well. It's really helped me, and just go for what you want. And I think we should take over the world. People who stammer, So my name is Felicity Baker. So I'll stop doing that. I'll do it again.